Good evening and welcome to the Hamilton Report. I'm Scott J. Hamilton, and I'm happy that you're with us this evening. In just a moment, we'll be talking with our guest this week, Jim Curry, who is the president of the AFL-CIO of Oklahoma. But before we do that, I just want to say a very special word of thank you to our guest from last week, Lorenzo Banks, an attorney in Oklahoma City, gave us a great deal of insight into the extraordinary need for criminal justice reform in Oklahoma, looking at the absolute devastation that our current sentencing laws has presented to many Oklahoma families. So if you missed that broadcast, I hope that you will take a moment and go back and see it as you can with all of our previous programs on our YouTube channel, which is okdemocrats.org/YouTube. I hope that you've enjoyed your nice long weekend today. It's the unofficial end of summer, a time when families typically come together, although with COVID, I know things were different this year for my family, and I expect that they may have been for yours as well. But it is a time to celebrate family and friends. But it's also more than that. It's a day that we set aside as a nation to recognize the extraordinary accomplishments and contributions that have been made to the American workplace because of unionized workers. And so that's why our guest tonight is very important. And I am happy to welcome him to our show, Mr. Jimmy Curry, the president of Oklahoma AFL-CIO. Jimmy, thank you for joining us tonight.
I appreciate it. I am glad you invited me. I don't get a chance to do this much anymore.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have you. I know that everything is different this year. Today's Labor Day parade was different. No bands. It was lots of social distancing, everyone with masks. And that's just kind of our new normal now. And I'm at least glad that that there was this representation of labor, because I think in Oklahoma especially, it's real easy for us to lose sight of just how much we have to be grateful for as American workers to unions throughout our country and throughout our history. I was surprised to see how many people are represented by unions in the country now. I was also a little bit disappointed to see that those numbers have fallen somewhat. But right now, 16.4 million American workers are represented by a labor union. And percentage-wise, that is down. From what I understand, though, it's not because people don't want to be a part of a union, but rather there's great opposition, particularly by big corporations. Is that what you would agree to as well, Jimmy?
Yeah, especially here in Oklahoma, we're 6.2% of the workforce. We're a small union density state, unlike the East or West Coast or even the Gulf Coast for that matter. And not only corporations, labor laws, there are a lot of things that make it difficult to join a union in the state of Oklahoma, but most people don't realize Oklahoma has a large or long-standing history, labor history. The platform, the Shawnee platform that was part of the original Oklahoma Constitution was brought forth by the unions to help out with stopping child labor. Samuel Gompers actually noted that the original Oklahoma Constitution was the most progressive for working families at that time that had ever been written. So Oklahoma has a long history of unionization, and we helped start with statehood, although over the past 100 plus years, the plight of working families in Oklahoma has gotten a lot more difficult.
It was Senator Ted Kennedy who said that anyone who works for a living should not live in poverty. And sadly, a lot of people in Oklahoma do work. They work one job, two jobs, three jobs, and still their family exists in poverty. How do we move forward in terms of a living wage in Oklahoma, for example?
That's a really good question. The minimum wage right now in Oklahoma is tied to the federal minimum wage at 7.25. Just last year or the last 2 years, Arkansas, similar to Oklahoma, they did an initiative petition, and the citizens of Arkansas raised their minimum wage to a little bit over $10 an hour. Um, and if you figure at $10 an hour, 40 hours a week, that's only a little over $20,000 a year. You're still going to be below the poverty level. So there's a lot of work to be done that Oklahomans need to be aware of. Their votes, those candidates that they elect to office have a lot to do with the economic benefit of working folks in Oklahoma.
They certainly do, and I think that one of the things that often, especially in a presidential election year, we focus so much on the national election, but a lot of the importance when it comes to legislation for workers takes place right here in Oklahoma.
That's a great point. There was a bill actually introduced this year by a Republican House member that would have reduced the number of unemployment weeks from a max of 26, which is what it currently is in the state of Oklahoma, to 12 weeks total max that you would get unemployment benefits. That bill was actually still alive up until they went sine die at the Capitol, but the normal Oklahoma public doesn't see what happens at the legislature, and it's not done in the back rooms or nothing. It's done right there on the floor of the House. Thankfully, COVID and everything else, there was so many bills that got killed this year, and that was one of them. But those are little chips away. I could go on about the workers' comp law that was passed under Mary Fallin in 2013 that gutted and injured workers' rights in the state of Oklahoma. I remember when I first started that at that time it was called Southwestern Bell. They had 12 lobbyists for one corporation, 12 registered lobbyists working at the state capitol.
Just in Oklahoma?
Just in Oklahoma. That was 20 years ago. I don't keep track now of how many they have, but that gives you an idea of the power. And I could still go on about term limits of what they've done to the institutional knowledge at the state capitol. Everybody thinks that government should be run like a business, or so that's to say. Government's not a business. It's a service. It provides services and regulations where we get our clean water, we get our fire and police and everything else. And those local decisions, more than presidential races, will affect your life more in a day-to-day than anything else.
Even taking that closer to home, when you look at the importance of city councils in Oklahoma, city councils, town councils, who you elect for mayor, who you elect to the school board, these are decisions that impact all of us in a very personal way. So at every point up and down the ballot, I think you're right. We really have to pay attention to what people are saying, particularly about working conditions and working Americans. Because you just mentioned unemployment. And whether it's 12 weeks or 26 weeks or a year, the bottom line is you cannot pay your rent for one person on that. And so if you are supporting a family, something's got to go. And already so many people in Oklahoma are food insecure, children who wake up in the morning not knowing if they're going to have anything to eat all day. So when we start talking about those kind of restrictive actions, it's almost like punishing someone for losing their job, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And when you talk about those races, and we're talking Democratic politics with the party faithful, if there's enough of the old party that's been around, remember 30 years ago, the Republican Party went after school board seats. They went after those city council seats. They owned all those school boards and city council races, and they built their farm club up. And now they control the legislature. It's ironic. 20 something years ago, when I got started at the Capitol, I believe there was like 75 Democrats in the House. There were only 8 or 9 Republicans in the Senate. I did not realize at the time how good things were. But it's ironic. Back then, the Democrats fought amongst themselves. There was what we called the business Democrats and yellow dogs. And now the exact opposite's happened. And you see that over at the state capitol. The Republicans have the super majorities in both, and they have 2 different split caucuses. You have the far right ones that want to abolish abortion, that fight with the moderate wings of the Republican Party. So it's kind of ironic to see that, but until we as Democrats, and I have been a lifelong registered Democrat, start to fill in those school board seats, city council races, and I've been very impressed with some of the new candidates that we've had or are actually sitting on the city council in Oklahoma City. You're starting to see that turn around a little bit in the urban areas. And ironically, again, 20 years ago, all of rural Oklahoma was Democrat, and Republicans controlled the urban areas. And now you see the exact opposite. And I think Democrats would be wise to take advantage of those. School board and city council races are decided by total turnout are only in the hundreds. You can really make a difference in your politics and what happens to you in your neighborhood by those city council and those school board elections.
Let's switch gears just a little bit, Jimmy, and look at some of the things that organized labor has done that has improved working conditions for all Americans. In a moment ago, that dealing with child labor issues, that has early in this country's history, that was a real issue, and it continued to be for some time. But I know that the labor movement had a very strong input into stopping that.
Yeah, back in you go in our statehood history, children were working in the coal mines and not going to school, and that was one of the things that was put into the Oklahoma Constitution, child labor, that they had to go to school rather than work in the coal mines trying to scratch out a living. But here, even recently, I'm 63. I'll give my age away, but I remember going to work at 13 because you could at that time for $1 an hour. Tickled to death when I finally got to 16, I could actually make the minimum wage at $1.65. But those things, I shouldn't have been going to work before I was 16. Those things have changed. Now you can't go to work before you're 16. And if you do, there's only certain places, dangerous places. So those changes have come along. OSHA, which is ironic that it was President Reagan that put EPA, signed the bill that pushed for it to pass. And that's where we got OSHA, that our current president is trying to destroy it. The EPA, the 40-hour work week, the three-day holiday that's coming up this weekend. In all the years I've been doing this, I get calls all the time about people wanting to organize, but you'd be surprised. Most people think it's over money. Very rarely is it over money. It's about the workplace, being safe and having dignity on the job. I can't stress enough that 90% of the people that want to join a union come because their boss has treated them unfairly, harassment, not just sexual, but any kind of harassment. It's unbelievable, the mentality that some employers, they treat their workers kind of like they're a disposable commodity. If you get hurt, or if you don't keep, or if you have a sick kid, or you have health conditions, I'll get rid of you and I'll find somebody else to replace you. The maddest time I ever got, I was sitting in a committee hearing at the Capitol, and some little dude from Ardmore, Oklahoma said there shouldn't be any unemployment because he had all kinds of openings in his restaurant and his hotel at $7.25 an hour, and by God, they needed to be working and not drawing unemployment. He had no idea what it's like to try to raise a family in Oklahoma, to sit at a kitchen table and have two piles of bills. And if you know what I'm talking about, if you've ever sat at the table and had two piles of bills, you know what I'm talking about. Unfortunately, we have, from the president on down, folks in elected positions that have no idea what it's like to try to struggle and make a living paycheck to paycheck. I get my soapbox from time to time, but
no, that's an important point, and I'm glad you brought that up because I know what it was like when I was growing up. I grew up in South Oklahoma City, a working class family, and it was a matter of deciding who gets paid this month and who can wait until next month or can wait until Friday, or and it was a constant juggling, but we always had food on the table. But that was a long time ago, and now here we are in 2020. And Oklahoma families are still dealing with that, except in a more dramatic way than probably in my lifetime. And we, just this past week, we were hearing how great that things were moving with the economy, and the stock market was soaring. But if you're an average worker, it doesn't matter what the stock market does. It does not directly impact your life. What does is where you spend most of your time, which is on your job.
Yeah, my daddy was born and raised in Brooklyn during the Great Depression, and he always told me that the stock market's just for rich folks. Yeah, I've got a 401k and some other stuff. I don't own any stocks. They folks get sold a bill of goods that the stock market's great and your 401k is great, although you're making $12 an hour. They buy into a sense of reality that doesn't exist, or that they think's right around the corner. The best thing is to have a voice on the job, to be able to meet with your employees. Right now in Oklahoma, state employees don't have a right to collective bargaining. City employees don't have a right to collect because there's not a law in there. In the South, we are the only state in the South that has collective bargaining for police, fire, and teachers statewide. You go to Texas or Mississippi, Louisiana, it has to be city by city by city. There is
really
nobody understands that. And that was one we actually had passed under Brad Henry the right for city employees to organize. And God bless Mary Fallon, she come along and repealed it in her very first 2 months in office. But there's a lot of folks out there. But then I'll tell you one other story. This was almost 20 years ago. We tried to organize Hobby Lobby. We had the steelworkers had an active campaign. They fired 6 of the organizers that are out there. Well, that killed the organizing drive. They filed suit. It was illegal to file because they were trying to organize. Took 2 years before it was ever heard before the National Labor Relations Board, and they agreed that Hobby Lobby had fired them for trying to form a union, freedom of association. And what was the penalty? They had to pay every one of those 6 employees their 2 years back wages. Oh, okay. Except any money that they went out and found another job and worked in those 2 years, all those wages were deducted from the penalty to Hobby Lobby. So where is any penalty to keep the corporations from not trying to keep the workers from organizing?
I was
glad to hear you're an old Southsider too. I'm in Grant High School, so
U.S. Grant.
75.
Okay, I went to Capitol Hill, so we were rivals back then and friends now. I like that. You were talking about Hobby Lobby. I was surprised to learn that there is actually a career in something that I had never thought about. It's called union avoidance consulting. And so a company can actually hire these consultants who will launch a campaign to discourage workers from organizing. Now, I don't know how that's legal because there are some protections in place for organizing, but yet these folks get paid a lot of money, Jimmy.
I hadn't thought about that in a while, but 25 years ago, and they're still in existence today, there's a place called Labor Research Institute in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, that has been doing for 25, 30 years exactly what you're talking about. What they did in Tulsa one time, we were doing an organizing drive. They actually recruited a local TV newscaster and paid them to do this anti-union 5-minute infomercial. And then all the employees that were trying to organize were made to watch the video. And here you got a local TV news reporter telling you how bad the unions are. You know, we're all crooks and you name it. But that's been going on forever right here in our backyard. It's amazing.
Where do you see, you mentioned a moment ago that most of the calls you get are from people who are being treated poorly on their jobs, and it's less to do with money and more about the quality of your work life, I guess. Are there particular sectors that you hear from more than others, Jimmy?
I will tell you this much: in the past 6 months, I have gotten phone calls from nurses both in Tulsa and Oklahoma City with the COVID crisis. They are worried about their health, their job requirements. They're not calling about money. They're paid decent, but they're worried about their health and safety on the job. But then you get into what I was referring to earlier, labor laws. Well, is it a public hospital or is it a private hospital? They fall under two different labor laws. Are you talking about licensed nurses or nurse practitioners or RPNs or all the other ones? Because then or all nurse assistants, well, are they also into that group? So the labor laws are so hard, but I will give you this one. I got this call about a month ago from librarians. Teachers, yeah, but librarians. The Metro Oklahoma Library Commission, I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's here in Oklahoma City. 300 librarians wanted to organize. Can't do it. It's run by the county of Oklahoma County. They are county employees. They receive their checks from the county of Oklahoma County. And there's no statute that gives them the right to collective bargaining, to freedom of association for the employees to form a union. So there's nothing. All I could do was tell them was sorry, I can't help you. There's nothing. You know, you could go out and form a union, get everybody signed up, but you can't make the employer do anything.
So where do we go from here with a situation like that? What would you like to see happen in the legislature to make it fairer for employees?
There's a lot of things that they could do. There's a lot of talk over the past few years about family medical leave, about employers having sick leave, especially now with COVID and everything else that's going on. If you have a sick mother you don't want in the nursing home because of COVID, there should be some ways for you to be able to take off of work. The right to organize, it's in the Constitution, freedom to assemble. We think it's a basic American right, if not a human right. Unfortunately, the laws in Oklahoma, even though they're better than all the other states in the South, still don't give your city employees the right. Don't give your county employees, state employees. That would be huge. The state of Oklahoma should give those employees those rights if they want them. If you don't want to join, it's a right to work state. It always has been. All public employees have never had to be sign up a union for a conditional employment. That's never been the case. But if they want to, they ought to be given that right. And I think that would be huge. And I think that would, and this is probably where the corporations, they're scared to death of it because, oh my God, if you give the city and the county, these state employees, they're going to drain the coffers. It's going to cost the taxpayers. And the next thing you know, my employees want to join a damn union.
Yeah.
It's an uphill battle, but they're not going away, and we damn sure ain't either. We're going to be here too.
That's what I like to hear. Jimmy, our time is just about up, but I want to, again, thank you for joining me on Labor Day. And, it's Labor and the Democratic Party have long time been friends. And I'm grateful that we have a chance to work together. And I should just mention that the Oklahoma Democratic Party was the first state party in the country to organize. So my whole staff is covered by a collective bargaining agreement. And I'm proud that we were the first. Many other states have since followed suit, but that does make me proud.
That says a lot for the reddest of the red states in the country, and it gives me bragging rights when I go to other state conferences that y'all not only talk the talk, you walk it too. And I thank you all for that.
Well, thank you for all that you do, not just for your folks, but for all workers in the state of Oklahoma. You've been doing this work a long time. You were first elected as president in 1997, and you're still making positive changes. So on behalf of all of us who work for a living, thank you, Jimmy, and I hope that you'll come back and see us soon.
I will. Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it, and have a safe, happy Labor Day.
Thank you. Well, we've covered just some highlights this evening on what the labor movement has done and can do for American workers. I know how frustrating it is to see an employee who is mistreated by a manager, who is subjected to horrible attitudes from customers, and yet these are people that we encounter every day in the supermarket, in fast food establishments. And so I just want to offer a personal thought, and that is that on this Labor Day and moving into the fall, that we take a moment and just extend a bit of generosity to the people who serve us and people who we interact with so very often in our lives. One last note before we leave this evening, and that is this: the Hamilton Report, as with all programs at the Oklahoma Democratic Party, needs your support. Everything we do is only from individual contributions. And right now, with everyone's focus on November and Washington, I ask that you at least give serious consideration to supporting the party. $10 a month, $20 a month, whatever is comfortable for you. But please make a commitment to yourself and to the party, and ultimately for the brighter future of all Oklahomans by supporting us today. You can do that at okdemocrats.org/donate. Until I see you next Monday night at 7 o'clock, I thank you for joining us. I hope that you have a great week, a short week ahead, and take good care of yourself and be good to each other. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.